sometimes the plants will, like, try and die off after a rainstorm because they get too much water. Or you walk around ponds and lakes, and the fish will come up to the surface just dead.
Tune into a cleaner future with Pollution Evolution.
We are your hosts,
Faith
and Kimberly. Today we have with us one of our field technicians, Avery.
Hi.
To follow us along on this journey, follow our Instagram at Pollution Evolution Podcast. You can also stream new episodes every Saturday at 4 p.m. Central Standard on YouTube, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcast. And we have recently added into our link tree references for all of our episodes with all of our scientific research, any products we mention, any DIYs or experiments. To follow us along on this journey, follow our Instagram at Pollution Evolution Podcast. You can also stream new episodes weekly on Saturdays at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcast from. And a cool new thing that we've just added is our link tree in our Instagram bio actually contains all of our scientific references, research, and any links or products that we talk about in the podcast. And they're organized by episode, so you can go and find them there. And if you have any questions or want to do further research, that is a great place to begin.
Yes, and so today we're going to be talking about It's Raining Sulfuric Acid. Hallelujah! We will be discussing sulfuric acid. But before we begin, I wanted Avery, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Avery. I'm 20 years old from the Texas Panhandle, and I live directly around all of the plants. I grew up near the main plant, which directly affected all of the agriculture and scenery around my home. It was always black, the snow was black, and the rain always turned the cat's feet black. I'm here today because the town needs to change, and other people need to learn about how to be more conscious about the environment.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you on for our 5th episode, and I think that you're the perfect guest to have to talk about sulfuric acid in the rain because you have experienced it and probably have had it rained on you, unfortunately. So now that we're going to talk about that, let's talk about how acid rain is actually formed. So acid rain is directly formed because of fossil fuel combustion. If that was not occurring, there is some natural sources of it, but it would not be on the scale that we have seen it on today. And essentially, once water and oxygen come in contact with sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide from industries such as coal, carbon black, and other various things, they form interactions and they actually form sulfuric acid vapor, and that vapor can either come down as rain, fog, or snow. So it's not just acid rain, there's actually
different types.
Yeah.
I think I've seen all 3 of those in the past 2 weeks alone.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's for me, I'm just oh yeah, that's normal.
Yeah, I just growing up, I didn't live in a town where that was the norm. We had pretty decent air quality. We were not getting rain sulfuric acid on it. So I'm just shocked that it's so normal to y'all.
Yeah, but so whenever Faye's talking about there's rain, snow, and also sleet and all of those things, whenever acid rain falls, it can fall and deposit essentially on the ground in 2 different ways. So firstly, it can do wet deposition, which is those 3 examples we just talked about. So that's whenever there's essentially water attached to the acid particle, allowing it to fall from the clouds. And there's also dry deposition. So whenever it's dry, it's the particles are coming down as particles alone. So there's nothing attached to it. It's not wet or anything, and it's just a solid. And so the bad thing about those is they actually can accumulate in areas, and whenever it rains, if it's already raining, the acid rain is also going to wash out that acid, and it's going to move it into our rivers, streams, and then eventually it can leach into our groundwater.
Yeah. It's very interesting to say the least. And like to kind of give a perspective on exactly how acidic this rain and vapor and dry deposition is, normal rainwater has like a pH around 5.5, and the pH scale goes from 0 to 14, and 7 is like a very basic, like not acidic, pretty alkaline thing. And so 5.5 is slightly acidic but not quite. And so acid rain actually has a pH of 4, which is very, very acidic, and it's on a logarithmic scale, so you would take like 10 and raise it to that power. So it'd be 10 to the 4th or 10 to the 5.5, and it would just be exponentially large, essentially. So you can see that acid rain, like, is very, very acidic. It's up there with, like, very corrosive things that can eat away metal, eat away human flesh.
Yeah.
It's just not...
It depends on, obviously, the concentration that it goes into the air to begin with.
Yeah.
That interacts with the clouds to form it.
Yeah.
So in areas where there is a lot of emissions from, like, these fossil fuel industries, you're going to get, like, higher concentrations of acid in your rain.
Yeah.
Like, that's just how it works.
And then the pH is going to be higher because, like, it's just chemistry, you know? It's basic math at that point. And the more...
pH is going to be lower, right?
Yeah, the pH will be lower. I meant higher as in, like, more acidic.
Oh, yeah.
But lower on the pH scale.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now that we've talked a little bit about, you know, where, like, it's happening, let's talk about, like, where it originated from. You know, how did we find out this is even happening in the first place?
Yeah. Like all great pollution stories begin, it starts with the Industrial Revolution. Before this, like, we were not using fossil fuels anyway, like, at the rate we see today. And that was, like, in the 19th century. So in around 1845, there was a scientist named Ducros who recognized that acid was actually a contaminant that is being formed by certain pollutants. And then in 1852, the term acid rain was actually coined by a chemist named Robert Angus Smith, who had noticed that leaves were actually being damaged after rainfall. And like you were talking about, Avery, acid directly destroys crops. Like, plants are very sensitive to pH changes. So any slight alteration can literally ruin an entire crop yield for a year or even more, depending on the extent. These studies were kind of the very first to link emission events with these rain events. So it was almost like the first of its kind. This was pretty groundbreaking stuff. But unfortunately, we didn't learn. And so in the 1930s, there was steps to start to kind of control this, but ultimately it met resistance because the fossil fuel industry basically lobbied against legislation being passed. They were like, they had the money, they had the power, and they knew the damage of these things, but because it would hurt their profits, why would they?
Yeah.
Why would they want legislation passed? But ultimately, it kind of failed. And international attention kind of started being brought to these things. And so in the 1980s, the Acid Deposition Act was passed in the U.S. After 10 years after that, the National Acidic Precipitation Assessment Program, that's a mouthful, also passed. And so there was this program called cap trades, and I'll let Kim kind of describe like what those are. And that is like one of the best ways that we're doing to control acid rain from industry. So take it away.
So cap and trade program it kind of gets really complicated, but I'll try to simplify it as much as I can. So essentially you get a cap on each industry. So each facility in an area is given, you're allowed to emit so many tons of XYZ emission every year. That is your cap. But if you realize that you are going to emit a lot more than that, then that's where the trade comes in. So they have things called credits, emission credits. So for each pollutant that is regulated, they have a credit for it essentially. So say for this one, sulfur dioxide, you are allowed like 100 tons per year. You realize you are going to emit 300 tons a year. Well, what you can do is you can buy emission credits from somebody else who is actually reducing their emissions. And this makes it kind of a legal way to skirt the cap.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what they do is the trade portion, they realize that industries that want to emit more make more money. So they kind of make it like a monopoly thing. Like, they like play with it. Like, they make it a game almost, because they're like, well, you're gonna pay whatever amount we say because you need this. And so it's kind of like, I don't want to say exploitation, but
a little bit.
Yeah.
And like, the unfortunate part is that cap and trades have historically actually worked to lower like in the long run. So it's like, it's difficult to want to condemn them when they do good, but on the, like, when you look at it, it's like, dude, is that really a solution?
Yeah. And the thing with cap and trade is that it's not, like, it does reduce emissions over time. But it's, like, in my opinion, it's, we could be doing a lot more.
And there's better alternatives to
Pushing maybe cleaner alternatives, which is also something that they do with the cap and trade.
Yeah.
So that's one of the benefits of the cap and trade is you give a cap, and because you're saying you have to reduce your emissions from this previous year and to this future year, then you have to give them options of what is feasible for them to do. Like, in all of the rules that are passed in our state, at least, they tell you, there are devices that cost like this much money, and this is how much you would spend a year to reduce your emissions to the limit that we set. So they actually make it to where they provide as much information to the industry as possible for them to actually abide by these rules.
Yeah. So, that is to say that legislation is actually working when it comes to acid rain. And, it has been very effective, even in combating all of these issues when it comes to profit over people. But, unfortunately, there are still industries that are missing the mark and continuing to emit outside of these limits or not implement these legislative changes in the way that they should. And that's why we're here today.
Is there anything that people can do in the community to, battle the buying more caps, more emissions? Did I use the right word?
Yeah, you did.
To my knowledge, I don't know, to be honest with you. So that's something I would have to look into, and I'll try to provide the resource in our link tree, and I'll let you know whenever that comes out as well. But I do know that for communities, if there is concern about pollution in any regard, there is complaint forms in most every state. You can complain and you can say, I've been seeing so much pollution in my area, and I know it's not normal. Can you come out and take a look?
Yeah. And also, Avery is our field technician. She's been doing water quality testing for us, and you can actually get those strips and actually see if there are high levels of or if the pH of the rain is very high, and that indicates a level of acid, because we talked about rain's at 5.5 pH, so if it's going to be 5.5 or less, that indicates acid. And so if you're collecting samples and testing them with a cheap test kit, you can also start to form your own data to present to the TCEQ, to the EPA, to environmental justice groups, to say hey, I was a concerned citizen, I just got this little kit and started looking, and I noticed this pattern each time, there's a huge, emission event from the facilities by my house, there's a rain event shortly after, and then the rain's acidic. What's going on here? There's a consistent pattern, and that is also another way, even if we can't fight, stopping them from capping and trading, we can at least gather data to still get monitoring to occur.
Yeah, because monitoring is the first step for these agencies take whenever they realize it's a big enough issue. They'll start monitoring. Specifically in this case, they would monitor for sulfur dioxide. And depending on which, if it's a community concerned about a specific industry, they can do what's called fence line monitoring. And that means that they put a monitor right next to the fence, or as close to the fence of the industry as possible, just to show, if we're going to show that this specific industry is an issue, you can't just put the monitor in the middle of town or something and expect it to pick it up. But along with what Faith was saying, Avery, like, to give you some hope in our efforts, I know that it's a lot going out and doing these samples, but it's I saw a video the other day of a woman who started a community effort to clean or to like collect samples in her city because she noticed it was very polluted. And it became the biggest class action, I believe, that was won by a citizen. Because she had put together years worth of evidence. And what she did was she collected all of the evidence and she saved it. And then one day she went up, and I think they had like wagons or something pulling all of their samples. And she was like, gosh. I have a problem.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does have a problem if she has wagons.
Yeah, so that just goes to show how important it is, like, to get out and do these things.
Yeah. And, like, you don't have to necessarily be, like, an engineer to make those differences. Like, yes, we have that background, and, like, we understand the science and, like, the mechanisms behind what's actually occurred in the environment, but any concerned citizen, if you care enough, like, that's all you need to do is just care. And then you can make any change necessary for the environment and for the planet.
Yeah, so, now that we've talked a little bit about that, let's talk about the health effects a little bit of acid rain, or the good thing, like as Faye said, is that it's reduced over time.
Yes.
But the thing also is it does have health effects. So whenever you are exposed to acid rain, it can cause itching on your skin. It can cause some burns, depending on the acidity as well. It can cause some respiratory problems. So like you can get asthma. You can be coughing, like really dry cough without having any mucus come up. Or you can just like, your throat can be really irritated, like itchy. But as we said, I'm hoping we'll actually include in our references, there's some maps that show from, I believe, the 1940s to now how our acid rain concentrations have reduced.
Yeah, it's good.
It looks amazing. So we'll put it up there, and hopefully everybody takes a look at it. Avery, I'll send it to you after this so you can look at it.
Okay.
But yeah, it's now that we're talking about, how it's improved over time, let's talk about some of the environmental effects.
Yeah, so again, like, even with this improvement, there are still people being affected. If you live near a coal-fired power plant, you more than likely are going to be exposed to acid rain unless they've moved to a cleaner coal alternative that does not produce sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxides as byproducts after the burning of them. But there's this effect called the downwind effect. So when we were doing nuclear testing in the US, there was an effect called the downwind effect, and it was found that people downwind that lived, if there was a nuclear testing facility, like, I don't know, a couple miles away, all the people that lived, like, to the east of that were affected by this, or whichever way the wind was blowing that day, and it would literally move nuclear waste and debris directly over their cities and over their towns, and it caused multitudes of birth defects, cancers, radiation poisoning. So it's just genuinely horrible things. And now this term is coined for any sort of like downwind pollution, and unfortunately these coal-fired power plants and the people that live downwind of them are going to be most affected by these health effects and the environmental effects. And depending on how fast the wind is moving, the circulations, it could carry for hundreds of miles. So you could literally be affected in whole other states, whole other countries.
Whole other
continents, yeah. So it's not just Borger, Texas, it's anywhere that is in those same circulatory patterns, depending obviously on the detention time of the pollutants. Every pollutant has a different time it stays in our atmosphere. Some are really long, some are really short. That does depend on it too, but like in this case, acid rain has a pretty long detention time.
Yeah. And it's pretty capable of traveling.
Yeah, very quickly.
Yeah. So some of the other effects are obviously on the fish and the wildlife in the area. So Avery, I don't know if you knew this, but every living organism requires a different pH to be able to survive. And so we have a little graph here, and at snails, like once it gets to 6, then they're like, okay, this is a little bit too much for me. Clams also at 6, but as you go down, frogs their pH level is 4. So some of these, like bass, crayfish, mayfly, trout, salamanders, anything below 5, which is typically going to be acidic, is like they can't survive that.
You'll see fish kills, and that's going to disrupt the entire ecosystem. Anytime a single animal or organism gets removed, even if it's like a small little bug, it throws off the entire chain because it's a system.
Yeah, because I was also reading an article about Hurricane Harvey, and how it actually increased the acidity of the water in Galveston Bay for 2 weeks, and it increased it by 4 times the acidity.
Yeah.
Like the pH went down that much. And it actually killed a lot of the oysters that were in the area.
And if you didn't know, Avery, oysters actually are one of our best, like, water filters. They naturally filter water through them. So, like, in the Chesapeake Bay, prior to, like, all the gross pollution that happens there, it used to be so pristine and clear. And there's been a lot of efforts to preserve the bay, which is really good. But it's because of the oyster and mussel populations there. They were keeping the water clear, and it was literally pristine because of them. So oysters dying off in Galveston, that's already, anybody that lives in Texas knows you don't go to Galveston. And like it's so detrimental already. Kind of on that effect, it doesn't only affect animals, it also affects the plants and trees. Acid rain actually causes aluminum to be leached from clay soils. So it's not only like sulfur dioxide we have to deal with, but also heavy metals. And when that aluminum gets into water, gets into plants, and it's uptaken by these systems, it's bioaccumulated by the fish in the water, it also kills them. It disrupts the ecosystem again. It's like this massive chain of events, and you basically begin to see that the acid is just kind of a precursor to all this devastation, and also we have to live there, and also we have to eat these things, and also those are the fish that we're fishing. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's lovely to think about, isn't it?
And the Panhandle, especially in Hereford, is like the beef capital of Texas, isn't it?
Yeah, I think of the world.
Of the world. Yeah. But methane is one we'll get into a later time.
There will be a methane episode.
That has a whole that one warms the climate and yeah.
Have you ever noticed, like, any of these environmental changes in Borger that we're mentioning? Like, as we're talking, are you like, oh my gosh?
Sometimes the plants will, like, try and die off after a rainstorm because they get too much water. Or you walk around ponds and lakes, and the fish will come up to the surface just dead. It doesn't look like from anything not natural. So, yeah, you see it all the time.
Yeah, that's crazy. And, like, do people ever question when they see that, or is it just like, oh, that's just what happens after the rain?
Yeah, I think everyone just accepts it as normal because they don't know anything else.
Yeah, and like, to give our viewers another perspective, what Avery's demonstrating is acidic, like fog and clouds, like we mentioned, actually strip nutrients from tree foliage and leaves them brown, dead, and whittled. And then it also affects the plant's ability to absorb sunlight, and in the Panhandle it gets very cold, so if we're getting snow, if we're getting rain, they can't withstand the freezing temperatures anymore. And so it's just like this whole ripple effect. So that's why like all of our people that live in these acidic cities, that's why the plants are dying. It's literally stripping them of their natural ability to absorb sun and like act as a plant and photosynthesize. It's so much deeper than just like, that just is what happens. It's like, no, that's not just what happens. Like, again, acid rain is directly caused by fossil fuel combustion. If there was no fossil fuel combustion, the effects of acid rain would not be this high because volcanic activity only accounts for a very small amount of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The closer you drive to the plants down that carbon black road, the more dead the plants get and the less active wildlife is.
Yeah, like the trees, the bark has fallen off of them.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and that's why, because they're literally like, it's almost like the plant's being suffocated. Like, it's unable to do photosynthesis. Like, I wonder if we got like a sample of the tree and looked at the chloroplast, what they would even look like after this. Might be a fun little experiment, ladies.
We may need a fallen tree to get some tree rings. We're not going to kill a tree for it.
No, we don't kill trees. But if the bark is there, we will collect it. Oh my god.
It wouldn't be too hard to find one.
Yeah, that's true. And like another aspect of all of this that we haven't really touched on is actually like buffering capacity. So the ability for something to buffer an acid is so important. Like, it literally is the reason why humans are not dead, why we can drink our water. It's because, like, whenever there's a change in pH, our bodies and the earth itself can adjust to that. Like, it can, like, buffer using, it's called, like, alkalinity. It's a term that we use in water treatment to, like, make sure water is not hard and alkaline. I'm not going to bore you with that. That's not a water treatment episode. But, like, in our forests, streams, rivers, and lakes, they actually have buffering effects in them because of the soil. And soil can actually act as an acid neutralizer as rainwater flows through it. But the issue is, it depends on the type of soil there. And in places like Borger or any other places where the land's been stripped already, where it's already like very damaged because of other pollutant effects, the soil can't really buffer as much. It can't really act as like that buffering effect because the soil's very alkaline depending on what's in it. If there's like a lot of like carbonate or things like that that aren't as acidic, like it can kind of stop that pH from rising. But if you've stripped all that and eroded it away, what's there to buffer? Yeah, so just another thing to think about. That's why we gotta take care of our soils.
Yeah, and that's also why, at least for my parents, whenever they garden, they have to till the soil, put a new topsoil, compost the soil. Like, you have to do, like, absolutely everything, otherwise nothing is going to grow. Like, like that's just the sad reality.
Yeah. And it's crazy because we live in the freaking breadbasket of the world. Like, we live in the Great Plains, one of the best places to grow things.
Yeah, and so along with like all these environmental effects, we also have episodic acidification. So whenever there's melting snow or heavy rain, like you mentioned, it can cause what we call episodic acidification. So lakes that usually don't have high acidity may like have higher acidity right after these events. Whenever there's like melting snow, like slowly going into that stream, that's slowly going to increase the acidity for a period of time. So this duration can actually cause like stress on the environment. And anything that's obviously not expecting stress is going to die because it has no response for it.
It's literally me this week. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Well, something we failed to mention is that acid rain is not just from sulfur dioxide, it's also from the nitric oxide. So nitrogen oxides that are formed or that are released into the atmosphere from, again, fossil fuels, also form into an acid. And those, I mean, they're both acids, so take with that what you will. I used to be one that used to love to play in the rain. I used to, with my friends, like, whenever it was these heavy rain downpours, we would be outside dancing in the rain.
Yeah. Dancing in the hallelujah rain. All the acid.
That was literally us in a room where it would rain.
It's kind of scary, though, because you guys, like, don't know. I think about all the kids that are, like, building snowman in this, and, like, when I was younger, I'd love to eat snow. Like, I'd mix snow with, like, sweetened condensed milk and stuff, and, like, it'd be, like, a little treat. And I wonder if, like, people have been eating...
I stopped playing with the snow. My mom told me one time, she was like, do not.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Avery.
The last time it snowed, like, when it snowed,
Mm-hmm.
one of my friends that I babysit her kids, she was like, I'm gonna make the sweetened condensed snow treats. And I was like, no, please don't do that. And she was like, it's okay, we're just strengthening their immune system. Not with Borger snow.
No! Listen, a word of warning for anybody. I grew up surrounded by the fossil fuel industry for at least 17 years of my life. I have possible cardiovascular issues. I have possible neurological issues. I have a rare migraine. And all of these things are a result of me being exposed to things. Mm-hmm. You know, like, I don't have any hereditary like genes that would say that I would have these issues. Mm-hmm. And so that just goes to show, just like with these things that we're talking about, like these health effects actually happen.
Yeah, they're real.
And I think that's also a part of why we started this, is because, you know, we're both not in the best of health right now, and we're doing our best to, like, maintain everything.
Yeah.
But once you realize, like, hey, what part of the health that I'm experiencing right now is a result of what I've been exposed to. Mm-hmm. And how many people out there are going through the same thing. Because some of these pollutants that we've talked about have some of the health effects that I have.
Yeah. Same. It's actually kind of scary because a lot of things, when I was sick a lot when I was younger, and we didn't know why, and it was unexplained, but where I lived and what I was exposed to matches up a lot with the symptoms I have and, like, the things I'm currently facing. And so I know that, like, even if some of it is hereditary, that it all was not. Yeah. And, like, it really was because of the environmental pollution I was exposed to. And that's something that, like, we have to grapple with forever, that, like, we're gonna be sick, and we don't even know, like, the extent of it yet, because we're still so young. Mm-hmm. It could be way worse when we're, like, 40 or 50.
But I'm hoping for you, Avery, that you stay healthy.
Yeah. Gonna just knock on wood.
Move away.
Yeah, seriously.
But the sad thing is, like, unless you move into, like, a
bubble.
Into a bubble. Well, like, it's kind of, like, because, like we said, everything transports. Yeah. Like, you don't have to live right next to a fossil fuel combusting industry to be able to be exposed to these things.
And even if, like, it leaches in groundwater, like, aquifers are massive, and they span, like, literally, and some go across multiple states. Mm-hmm. So it's just, like, it's just hard to escape. That's why we're fighting pollution and, like, genuinely trying, instead of, like, ignoring it, like, making people aware and raising that awareness to the point where nobody can ignore what's happening anymore. Mm-hmm.
And this is a very important time for that, because look at the state of the world.
Yeah, we've been discussing that a lot, actually. I think that this was a great time for Pollution Evolution to come out. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you know this, Avery, but one day we looked at each other and we said, why don't we start a podcast?
Yeah, we were just bored.
And now we've almost spanned every continent with our viewers.
Yeah.
That's so good, though.
Yeah, so it's exciting. Like, it's really nice to have you here and to, like, have these conversations.
Yeah.
And, is there anything, like, you wanted to add or that you thought of while we were talking?
I would like to add that the health issues that you have, everyone here has something, and it's all because I'm not saying it's all because of the plants, because some people that haven't been here for forevers, but the people that have been here for years and generations and generations, like my grandfather worked for Pantex for a lot of his life, and he's not in the greatest shape. And that's the story for a lot of people that live here and all around the Panhandle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really sad, and that's why it's important for us to talk about this. And I want to thank you for being on here. I know you're our first guest with video, so Yeah, and this is us for everybody. We never introduced ourselves.
Yeah, this is what we look like. But yeah, thank you again to Avery and like all of our listeners who have been supporting us and like watching us grow on this journey. We're really excited for the future because we have a lot of things in store for you guys that are really exciting. And I think that's going to be it for today. Like, thank you so much for coming to learn about sulfuric acid with us.
Yeah, thank you. And
thank you guys for having me.
What's the... Oh, I don't know what it did. Never mind.
Alrighty, well, we'll see you next time on Pollution Evolution when we discuss...
I don't know what our next week episode is. What is it?
White phosphorus. The horn...
Is it...
join us next week when we discuss white phosphorus. That'll be an interesting one for our viewers, so stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
It was good.
We need to stop. Everything that we have done for the past minute has been the same.
Even the hands, I had to unfurl them. We got that on camera.
That's a blooper right there.